Glenmore water treatment plant was first constructed in the early 1930s, and it was a depression project. So the city had purchased the land and then started the construction of the dam, the chemical building, and the filter plant. And when I say filter plant, I'm talking about the first 8 beds. The plant was actually commissioned in 1933. Took about 3 years, and that's where we are now. The original water supply for the city was actually on the Bow River. The plant was actually introduced to disinfect water and produce water at a higher volume. The most recent upgrades that we have were actually completed in 2011, and they were our pre-treatment and residual treatment facilities. So pre-treatment was designed to remove as much turbidity, and turbidity is that silt, sand, mud, all that little debris inside water before it would go onto our filter beds. On the other side is our residual treatment facility. So the residual treatment facility now allows us to be a zero discharge facility. That means that all the water that we take out of the river, we actually use in our process, and we don't discharge it back into the river. So what you're looking at right there, those are our dowel valves. Glenmore Dams has 2 very, very large diameter valves. During our high water events, we use the dowel valves to control the lake level. So as we open up those dowel valves, more water was released from the reservoir downstream. The low flow bypass is designed to maintain a downstream flow on the Elbow River to ensure that we are meeting our requirements by Alberta Environment and also supporting the environmental habitat. Our runoff period is typically from roughly May 15th to July 15th, and that's when you'll see probably the majority of the adjustments on the reservoir as well as the downstream flow on the Elbow River. After July, what you'll typically see is the reservoir will start to climb up, and we will hold it at a certain level. You'll see reduced flows coming down on the Elbow. Then come winter time, you'll see even further reduced flows because there's less water coming into the reservoir. So what we're looking at right now is the new gates that have been installed on the Glenmore Dam. A few years ago, we used to have wood stop logs. They were pieces of wood stacked on top of each other that we would use to raise the level of the reservoir in the summertime. The issue with the stop logs were we weren't able to have ice load up against them in the wintertime, which impacted our ability for storage, and those stop logs were also not rated for any kind of flood protection. The gates that you're looking at right now stay in a normally closed position, with the exception of if we have a very, very high water event, we would have to systematically open up the gates to support with the release of water. We can actually load these gates up to an operating level of 1.5 meters to help us with storage in the wintertime as well as the summertime. And they can go up to 2 meters during our high water events. Because of the construction of the gates, we can now actually load ice on these gates so we can actually maintain that level throughout the wintertime. In 2013, we experienced a very, very large rain event. What ended up happening was the amount of flow coming into the Elbow River was far exceeding the capacity of the reservoir. What we did here at Water Treatment is we actually lowered the operating level before the water was to arrive, and the water slowly kept rising and rising, and then we had to overtop the crest of the dam and have that water go downstream. The City of Calgary was one of the only drinking water systems that did not have a boil water advisory. It's one of the advantages of the City of Calgary where it's situated is the benefit, we have great source water. The negative side would be high water events. We have less time to react. We're really close to the mountains. Glenmore and Bearspaw are actually on different source waters. The Glenmore water treatment plant, the source is the Elbow River. At the Bearspaw plant, the source is the Bow River. Glenmore produces probably about 40% of the city's water, and Bearspaw handles about 60% of the city's water. The intent of the Glenmore reservoir is primarily for our drinking water. After that, storage, and then after that, it is recreational users. And there are a few motorized boats that are permitted to be on the reservoir. So the Calgary Fire Department, Calgary Police Services, Glenmore Boat Patrol. Those motorized boats go through a rigorous preventive maintenance program to ensure that we don't have any kind of fuel leaks or anything else that could go into our drinking water source. As more and more people enter the reservoir, they all start to have an impact on drinking water quality. There is one route that goes over top of the Glenmore reservoir, and it is very strictly controlled to ensure that we don't have hazardous chemicals or products crossing over top of the drinking water system. Infrastructure has also been built that in the event that there should be some kind of an incident and there is some chemical leakage, that we can manage that leakage and then remove that from the storage facilities and dispose of it safely. One of the risks to source water or to water quality for us is upstream development. Stormwater is actually captured in storm ponds that you see all around the city, and some of them are dry ponds and some of them are wet ponds. Debris from roadways and vehicles go into these storm ponds, it settles out, and then that settled water gets transferred and gets put into the reservoir. But also upstream development could even be things like new communities, new infrastructure, anything like that.
The issue that we have is we use a lot of electricity. It's not just the electricity in our process here, but pumping the water throughout the city. We have to pump the water uphill into these storage reservoirs, and then it feeds into certain zones. We have a lot of hills that we have to overcome.
On the drinking water side, we supply water to Airdrie, Strathmore, Chestermere, and Sutina. I've heard a number of anywhere from 200,000 to 300,000 services. We have our feeder mains and our distribution mains and all the rest, and then it would be a service off of that. So that could be for a home, that could be for an industrial user. We have to maintain our drinking water quality to the end of our system.